Even your congressman gaslights you about your experience with psych meds. We are your whistleblowing shrinks, Dr. Teralyn and therapist Jen, and this is the Gaslit Truth Podcast.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome. This is going to be something. I'm so fired up about this.
I'm fired up because I figured out how to bring some technology into this.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is not my forte at all, but we had to play this YouTube clip as part of this episode. Yeah.
Yes. And so if you want to see the YouTube clip, make sure you're watching this on YouTube as well, or watch it on YouTube later. But it's been going around, and I need to thank your functional nurse because she's the one who brought this to my attention, because I've been staying off of social media and news and things because I just can't handle it, until she showed me this. And I was like, Jen?
Yeah, we got to do an episode on
Yeah,
this one.
exactly.
So what you guys are going to see is a clip from YouTube, and in this clip, it's titled, "Do you think that people who take antidepressants are dangerous?" Tina Smith grills RFK Jr. So what this is Democratic Senator Tina Smith from Minnesota, and she is bringing up the idea of antidepressants and whether or not it creates dangerousness, which was based off a comment that RFK had made correlating antidepressant use and school shootings. So this kind of the background of what we're going to show you. So then we got some good research to bring in on this. Because, it makes sense to bring in a little bit of research and not just talk and try to use big words. Not that people do that. But,
well, she does that a lot. She
know.
throws in a lot of words that she has no idea what she's saying,
Yeah.
And so,
we got to also do it.
It's kind of triggering.
Terry and I are not making this like a political swing here for anybody saying you need to believe this if you're a Republican or you're a Democrat. Okay, please remove that from your brain when we do this episode, because this is about just getting curious about all sides of this. And for us, at least in our lens, some of the harm that's being done.
Mm-hmm.
So
a harm at high levels,
right?
Very,
very
high
levels.
levels. So,
all right, we're going to start this clip, and we'll see what we got going here.
Roll tape.
Shootings and antidepressants. And in fact, most school shooters were not even treated with antidepressants. And of those that were, there was no evidence of association.
I don't think you can say that, Senator, because the HIPAA rules, nobody knows.
Well, that is, Mr. Kennedy, do you think that people who take antidepressants are dangerous?
I think, listen, I'm not going into HHS if I'm privileged to be confirmed with any.
So you can't say that people
to impose any preconceived ideas that I may have. I just want to have good science.
So you're not saying that they aren't dangerous, which means that they could be dangerous. Let me ask you this.
That's not true.
You've described Americans who take mental health medications as addicts who need to be sent to wellness farms to recover. Is that what you believe?
No, of course I didn't say that anybody should be compelled to do anything.
No, but you said they should be sent.
I said they should be available to them. I didn't say they should be sent.
You said that folks that take antidepressants are like addicts. That I can provide that.
Oh, I think they should have the availability. Listen, I know people, including members of my family, who've had a much worse time getting off of SSRIs than they did than people have getting off of heroin. It's the withdrawal period is, and it's written on the label.
I have some experience with this myself, Mr. Kennedy. This is personal for me. When I was a young woman and I was struggling with depression, thankfully, I had the resources to help me get through it, including a new generation of SSRI uptake inhibitors, which helped to clear my mind, get me back on track to being a mom and a wife and a productive, happy person. And I'm really grateful for that therapy. So I have some experience with this, and I think that everyone should have access to that care. And your job as secretary is to expand access to care, not to spread lies and misinformation. And, the things that you say, Mr. Kennedy, they live on. They have impact. And, we're having this conversation at the same moment that my Republican colleagues are looking to try to figure out how to save money any way they can. And so they want to cut Medicaid. Let's just think about this for a minute, because you're going to be, should you be confirmed, you would be responsible for CMS, which provides mental and behavioral health care to millions of Americans. Close to 40% of folks on Medicaid have a behavioral health condition. And you would be part of this administration that would be looking to cut Medicaid. So, Mr. Kennedy, these statements that you've made linking antidepressants to school shootings, they reinforce the stigma that people who experience mental health every day face every single day. And I'm very concerned that this is another example of your record of sharing false and misleading information that actually really hurts people.
Senator, you're
Thank you,
mischaracterizing my statements.
I am only putting into the record what you have said, Mr. Kennedy.
You're mischaracterizing my statements, and I'm happy that you had a good experience on SSRIs. Many Americans have very good experience on it. Others have
that
not.
That would be an issue between them and their physicians, and not for the future head of HHS to be putting out misinformation about the dangers of SSRIs and other antidepressant medication, spreading the stigma and the fear that we're actually trying to overcome.
Do you think physicians, when they make that prescription, ought to have access to good science?
Of course they do. And
that's all I believe, too. And you and I are in agreement, Senator.
And to your point that you made when you made these statements, it was not based on good science. I don't know what it was based on.
I was saying the science needed to be done. I was saying these are potential culprits. We're coterminous, and I named other things. I said video games. I said social media. I said SSRIs. SSRIs have a black box warning of suicidal, homicidal behavior.
Mr. Chair, I will submit to the chair the information that I have about what Mr. Kennedy has said of linking antidepressants to school shootings. Thank you.
Let's take a collective of silence.
I found myself get teary-eyed with the correlation between antidepressants, withdrawal, and addiction and heroin addicts, and yeah, I mean, anybody who has gone through this, especially knows. Which is what we're going to talk a little bit about with some of the research on what happens when people start to withdraw off these meds and how it ruins their lives. So that one hit me. That one hit me pretty hard as I was recontemplating my whole life yesterday because I'm going through withdrawal.
Well, what's interesting is she stopped short of saying she took medication, didn't she? She said she took therapies. And I don't know if she's saying that medication is therapy or she went to therapy. I don't know. So I was maybe you hit something else on that. But the one thing I wanted to start with this is that she says, "Are you saying that people who are on SSRIs are dangerous?" This is what she said. And by saying that, you are stigmatizing mental health. And I think she's confounding these two ideas because we've talked before that people who have mental health diagnosis aren't dangerous people in general, right?
No.
But so she's confounding those two things because there is 100, and this isn't all people for sure, but there is 100% correlation or causation even between taking SSRIs and SNRIs and increased aggressiveness, increased irritability, increased homicidal thinking, behaviors, actions, suicidal thinking. And he was saying there's black box warnings on this that say that. And she's literally gaslighting the shit or dismissing it or basically cutting it off and saying, we're not talking about that right now, though. We're not talking about the other side. And this is the problem with everyone, fucking Jen. Like everybody, we're not going to talk about the other side at all. We're only because if we talk about the other side, then we are stigmatizing people getting care.
In fact, you have to have the qualifications to talk about the other side. I've been called out on that twice now on social media. What qualifications does therapist Jen have to make these types of statements?
I don't know. She's smart enough to read research and
I'm going through it.
And she's going through it, right?
I've lived it.
No, you're not. According
to
Tina Smith, you are not going through this, Jen.
So let's talk about a line she said, and then we can tie this into the article we have about SSRIs have helped me to become a mom, a wife, and a productive person. Okay. We've got to talk about that because I also believe there are a lot of people out there, even maybe listeners that are listening to this going, that is 100% accurate. Because I took this medication, okay, I now can function as a productive mom, as a wife. I can work because I have this.
Well, I mean, it's given to you under these ideas that it'll make you a better mom and a better wife and a better
Mhm.
productive member of society. That's how it
Yeah,
was given to me when I
yeah.
was pregnant. Like, do you want to be a good mom or not?
That's how it was
Well,
not
yes, I
taken from
do.
me. Yeah,
Yes, that's
yeah,
how Jen stayed on it for
yeah. What
years
kind of
and years
mom are
and
you gonna
years.
be if you
Like,
go off? Yeah. So
right.
I
What
I
the
think,
fuck is that about?
you know,
I'm so mad
I know,
today.
I am too.
Sorry
Okay,
about my
well, here's
language, everyone.
you said the
I'm
F word,
not. I'm
right?
really
There.
not sorry.
Okay. So when she said that, I'm thinking about, and I think it makes sense to bring up this research article that we're going to talk about there. And when she said that, I kept thinking about, as a mom, a wife, a productive person, what I've all missed out on
Oh god, I
because
missed out
of
on so
taking
much.
these meds. Okay.
Mhm,
So what is sold to us as this great bill of goods, right, doesn't end that way. We lose out on relationships. We lose out on connections. We forget time. We literally forget important memories that have happened to us, right?
that's
We
what I
have
call it. Like, it was, all these 6 years of memory stolen.
memories are
Stolen.
gone.
Yep.
Decisions that you make, okay, are made in a very disconnected, dissociative space. You're not able to connect emotionally with
Mhm,
your husband, with your children, with your best friends, right? And then you try to get off of it, which is where RFK is not wrong when he says
mhm.
the addiction that is there. He's not wrong. He is not wrong. You can
He's
call it
100%
dependence.
right.
You can call it whatever the hell you want. He compares this state of being with these drugs to that of a heroin addict in the concept of addiction. Yeah, send me to a wellness farm.
We've had someone on the show who's creating a
She's
wellness farm just
making
for
them.
this.
Like,
Yes.
I'd give anything. Do
Yes.
you know how much better off I would be in going through this titration if I went and lived somewhere for a handful of months and took care of myself?
Right. Why is
I
it okay to say, "Go to a lockdown inpatient," but it's not okay to say,
Yeah,
"Go to a wellness farm"? I mean,
yeah.
she was trying to say that, he wants to round people up and
Right.
force them to go,
And
which is
right.
a whole lot of
Again,
bullshit,
taking
but,
stuff out of context, which it
right.
probably is, right?
Mhm.
This is politics, right? So, like, even
Right.
what we are getting on YouTube, you guys, this is like a third of the truth, right? Like,
But damn, I
we
mean, there is a rehab in Hawaii
yeah,
actually that reminds me of something very similar to what he's talking about, and it
yes.
it it's actually like a 36-month program or something,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
So
3
let's talk
years.
about what happens though when that is not there for people.
Mhm,
Antidepressant withdrawal symptoms are linked to life altering consequences,
mhm.
according to a new study. So, this is what we're going to talk about. This was published by Mad in America here in January this last year, this
The
article.
research article is not published by
Yeah,
Mad in
the
America. This
article
is a
about it,
summary.
yes, and
Mhm.
the research article that's linked to this, if anybody is interested in it, when you go to Mad in America to their website and you look this up, in the first line, there's a link right to the research
Yep.
article. So this is what we're going to talk about because antidepressant withdrawal is statistically linked to some of these things that we're talking about here, life altering things. Like, it's crazy.
Well, they talk about 80% of the participants withdrawing from them had moderate to severe impacts on their lives. And including disrupted work, strained relationships, and even the loss of family.
Mhm.
Um, 40% or almost half of them said they lasted more than 2 years, and 25% were unable to stop taking antidepressants altogether because of the withdrawals.
Yes.
And, so we've talked about this addiction piece, and we get so much
I
shit
get so much
about
flack
people
for
like
this.
you are yes, well, I mean, because it's the same thing, like, "This is not an addiction, this is not," and I'm like, "Really?" People in addiction can't get off of things
Mhm. Yeah,
either because
yeah,
of withdrawal. They withdraw, they get
yeah,
sick, they wanna get back on,
yeah.
so why is this different?
I know.
You know,
And
I
the study, okay, that this is tied to, everybody, it's called The Nature and Impact of Antidepressant Withdrawal Symptoms, and a proposal of the DOS, which is a discriminatory antidepressant withdrawal symptom scale. So they took a cohort, a pretty big chunk of people who were already attending,
few thousand, right?
Yeah,
Was
it's
it
close to that. It was 1,200.
1,200?
1,200 respondents.
That's quite a lot.
Okay,
That's a good
that were
sample
part
size.
of these groups that were reaching out for help with their antidepressants. Okay,
Mhm.
and they ended up giving them this survey. And on this survey, right, there's 15 questions about antidepressant withdrawal symptoms. And what's interesting is people had to answer, did you have these symptoms prior to starting antidepressants? And then do you have these symptoms now that you're either withdrawing, coming off of the meds, or you're off of the meds? And the results are what you just read, Terry, right?
Yeah.
The percentages, those are the results.
So the question I have is, are we actually disabling people? If 80% experience disrupted work, strained relationships, and even loss of jobs,
Yes.
are
Yeah.
we actually disabling people? And I have said this probably a million times. Like, if psychiatric medications were the answer,
Yeah.
don't you think that depression and anxiety, even ADHD, would be eradicated? But people seem to be worse. And
Yes.
and they keep talking about, oh, the mental health crisis in America. Even though more and more and more people are medicated, we are still calling it a crisis of mental well-being. Well, let's
Yeah.
take a step back. Like, hold on, hold up, because people aren't reporting that they feel better, you know? But and then when they do, they get gaslighted into conversations like this lady, like,
Sure.
don't you want to be a better mom and a better wife and a better, all these things? And it's like, what? Or
Yeah.
maybe the medication is what's keeping you to this place that you feel like you can get off of it. Or maybe I feel like shit and I'm too afraid to tell you because
Mhm.
every time I go in, you just give me more.
I also think about the
Sorry,
thing
I'm
that
impassioned today. Sorry.
you
Too much coffee.
at least from personal experience, I didn't recognize how bad it was and what I really missed out on until I started to go off of it.
Correct. Yeah.
Like,
Well,
I think that's like the bitch of this whole thing
mhm,
because you don't like you try so hard like the idea of informed consent to be able to lay something out for people
mhm.
and go, it's very likely that maybe even short term you won't experience because what is informed consent when you take these medications? It's a lot about what RFK was talking about. There are black box warnings.
He actually mentioned informed consent. I don't know in this video, but maybe before it. Like he
Yeah,
said, what I
it was
want
in
is
the
informed consent.
Yep, it
Yes.
was in
Mhm.
the clips, there was, like, 2 minutes before this one that,
Yes.
was
Mhm.
about other things he said that, and I think that when there's a warning on a medication, that is given, right? Like, "Hey, there's a suicidality." I remember my providers talking to me about this, and every time I go in, "Are you suicidal? Are you feeling overly depressed?" They go through the main, like, 5 key features of major depression. Okay, boom, 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 check the list, right? But what isn't there is this kind of stuff that's being published now, which is this is the aftermath of what happens later.
Right.
This is the later stuff.
But
This is
people
what
would argue, but this is why you need to stay on it, because if this happens
right,
later,
right.
you know what I mean? That just means that your brain is
Mhm,
broken and you need to stay on it, which I would
right.
argue they're right. Your brain is broken now. Like,
Yeah.
it is
Yes.
broken.
Yeah.
And you're going to experience some of this stuff, which is probably harder to get out of, Jen, than the original problem that you had, you
Of the
know?
989 people who responded to the question about whether or not they experienced withdrawal symptoms, 971, which is 98.2% of those that responded to this one question, okay, reported they experienced them. Only 18%, which is 1.8% of these people, said that they had not.
Interesting.
98% of people are identifying withdrawal symptoms.
And 100% of those 98% have probably been gaslit by it.
Probably. Yeah.
Probably. You
Yeah.
know?
That's
It just
that's
means
the
that you need it or you need more
yep.
or get back on it or, all of these things,
Now,
and
here's okay, and I got this study up in front of me, so I gotta say this too. Something I
Mhm.
found to be very impactful on here is the duration of withdrawal.
Well,
Okay.
I was just gonna mention this, yes, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So the duration of withdrawal, okay, like this blows my mind. Over like 20% of the people in this study went through withdrawal that lasted at least 3 to 6 months. Now, they do define withdrawal based off of all of these symptoms.
Mhm.
Personally, for me, there's a bunch missing, right? Because there's only
Mhm.
like 15 symptoms, guys, on this
Right.
questionnaire that they
By the
measured.
way, they do mention akathisia as
They
part of it
do.
for SSRI,
They do.
SNRI, like,
Yep.
which we're not really talking about. We talk about that when it comes to antipsychotics,
Correct.
right?
We don't talk, yes, because
Mm,
it wasn't in the lingo for antidepressants. It still
ever.
isn't. Even when
It
you
should
look it
be
up now, it talks a lot
100%.
about the antipsychotic meds and
Yep.
not the antidepressants. Yes,
Mhm.
because a lot of that research was going more so in the psychotic med realm instead of the
Mhm.
antidepressants. But it's in there, which I love because it is a thing. Okay,
Mhm.
but so 19.4% of people in this study went through withdrawal that lasted between 3 to 6 months. Okay. 16.2% went through withdrawal that lasted 1 to 2 years.
Everybody listen to this.
I mean, 1 to 2
Years.
years, guys, which
Yep.
that doesn't surprise. It doesn't going through this. I don't doubt that at all. Okay.
Mm-mm.
And over 8% of people their duration of withdrawal was greater than 5 years.
5 years. So if you went to the doctor and they actually gave you informed consent and you started talking about things like, "Will I withdraw from this and how long?"
Yep.
These numbers should be used.
Right.
And so if they said, like, how many percentage was 5 years? Like, if they said or 2 years and they told you the percentage, then you actually can be like, "Is that something that I'm willing
Yes.
to participate in down the
Yes.
road?"
Yes.
Because what we do know is the majority of mental health issues, I say majority, I believe majority, somebody can correct me, but depression and anxiety, like, usually is it doesn't last forever. Like, when you get to that place that's super difficult,
Yeah.
it's not you're not always gonna be in that space, over years.
Mhm.
So, you have to start questioning, like, are there other ways to get out of this space? Or I'm gonna have a new set of symptoms for up to 5 years when I'm trying to get off of this, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know, like, this whole thing, if full informed consent were actually a thing, these numbers
Mm.
would be shared, you
They
know?
they would,
Or
and I
even the full informed consent that, the episode that we just did about how psychotherapy outperformed medications, how
yes,
psychotherapy outperformed psychotherapy and medication combined.
combined.
Like,
Yes.
why is that not part of the alternative of full informed consent?
Yep.
If somebody said, well, yeah, actually, the gold standard is just psychotherapy,
Mhm. Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
okay, I would do that because I'm not going to be withdrawing for 5 years after that, you
Well,
know?
that's just it, and I do think it's intriguing. It goes back to something you stated before, and now we have a study in front of us that is highlighting this, the idea that if these meds worked, right?
Hmm.
If they worked, we wouldn't continue to have these symptoms that are popping up. In this study, 18.2% of the people that decided, because they also measured why did people decide to go off. Okay. 18% of them said because that drug wasn't working. So you've got a chunk of these people that are going, I'm going off because it's not working. Um,
Well, when the quote unquote working
yep.
percentage is like less than
Well,
30.
and here's the deal. They differentiate between the drug no longer working and the drug did not help.
Oh, wow.
18.7% of people said the drug didn't help. This is why they were going off of it, right? So I think that's also a part of informed consent that's missing is having that active discussion about there is a likelihood this isn't going to work
Or help.
or help.
Mhm.
That it might start, but then it's not going to continue, which we know that is the case with antidepressants and how they impact the brain. We
Right.
know that we need more over time to keep it going because our
Mhm.
receptors are starting to get so fucking sleepy they can't it's not working anymore.
And that is
Right?
not here's another gaslighting term, optimizing your medication. It's
Oh my
like,
god.
go flush that term down the
You we
toilet because
Listen, if you put the word optimizing on anything, it means you're making it better, right? Like, but again,
right.
why are we optimizing shit that's supposed to work in the first place? What the hell do we need to
Truth.
optimize for?
Because
Why
you're
are we
treatment
optimizing?
resistant, that's why it's your fault.
Yeah. Well,
Your fault.
you need
I
a
do want
booster.
I do need a booster. Yes. I wanna bring in this idea. She said, s I wrote so fast, I can't even read my own goddamn notes at this point. Um, you're spreading misinformation and lies. And you're reinforcing the stigma of mental health. And I wrote, what the fuck is the stigma? Um, and I'm like, we've talked about the stigma of mental health before. And I'm like, so the only way we can talk about mental health to reduce the stigma is to say how great medications are and
Yeah.
they have zero side effects or zero risk involved. Even though they
Mhm.
have a black box warning, nothing to see here, they just had to put that on there.
Right.
I mean, it was just something that they had to do to cover their own ass, essentially, is
Mhm.
how we view it. Or even using antipsychotic medication in children to make them sleep. Like, what the
Yep.
fuck? Like,
Yep.
I don't think we should be using any of this shit off label. I think if there's a black box warning, that should just be removed from the market. Like, how can
Yeah,
you say
that's a good
that?
point.
Like, how can you say that it increases suicidality, homicidality, aggression, all of these things
Mhm.
into people up until they're almost 30 now? Like, it's your I probably more, except I think what it does to older people is numbs them out and, chemically
It does, and then it increased the
restrains.
risk of mortality,
Oh,
by
yeah.
about 60 to 70% once they are over the age, of
Y
65 and they've been taking
yes.
antidepressants for many years, but
Right.
I'm
Nothing to
making
see
that up.
here.
I'm making that up according to some people on TikTok. They don't like that. They don't
Exactly. They
like
don't like that
they
at
don't like
all.
me and Leslie Korn talking
Exactly.
truth about, like, statistics on what happens when you put elderly individuals on these meds for major depression,
Well,
the tricyclics in particular.
this is what happens when you cherry pick the information you wanna use,
And
okay?
that's just it. That
Mhm.
really is, right?
I
And
used to do it. I used to do it. And to be fair and honest with you, like, I cherry pick information
oh,
about
I
how things don't work now, like because I
yes,
wanna see it because nobody
yes.
is talking about the other side.
I just had a thought, because
Mhm.
I've been getting a lot of slander here recently on some of the TikTok stuff I've been putting out. And a lot of people are saying, I'm in the medical profession. What you are putting out is very dangerous.
Oh,
I
I hate
want you to show
danger.
me all the studies, okay, that
Go
you are.
get them
So,
yourself,
the
people.
first thing I wanna say, yes, is can you
Go f
just, like, fucking go Google Scholar yourself? This is not hard. Like, I found
No.
myself sitting here trying to go, "Okay, here was one of the meta-analyses that was pulled from
Nope.
here's," and I'm like, "You know what? Fuck this." Okay. That's the first thing. The second thing I was thinking about is, why is it that we're not in a spot to demand the research that shows that this actually works? Like, nobody's sitting here going, "Where's the research that shows this does work?"
Where's
It's
the
like
research
this
that's not funded by big pharma that
it's like
shows that
it's a
this works?
given for the world a lot of the
Yeah.
world now and for prescribers, okay, that these do work. Like,
Mhm.
how often do we go to a doctor and they say, "Listen, I'm really suggesting that you take this, SNRI because of
Here's the
X, Y, and Z."
research. Here's all the
Like,
not just
yeah,
one
how often
study.
is a patient or, like or even if I stuff that's put out there, there's not a lot of people challenging online, people that put stuff out about how effective it is. They don't respond and go, "Show me all the studies that show how well this does work." They don't, because
Yeah.
we took it face value. But when we whistleblowers put some shit out there that says, "Guess what? Here's the mortality rate for giving tricyclics to the elderly population and how much it
Mhm.
increases it." Right away, it's, "Where's the research? Where's the research?"
I don't believe you. I don't believe you. I don't
Yes,
believe
it's
you.
it's this
Mhm.
big flip. Like, it's as if we stopped asking. We're asking for the research in the wrong spot. Or we're asking for it on the back end when things
I
don't
only
work.
want the research to affirm. Um,
True.
that's all I
Yeah,
want. I want the
so
research to affirm this.
that was
But I
my
still go into this
soapbox.
again about, like, the prescribers, like, because there's so many somebody goes, "Why do you call them prescribers?" And I said, "Well, because there's a nurse practitioners can prescribe, PAs can prescribe." Like,
Yep.
I said, "Not just a psychiatrist
Yeah.
prescribes this. They're not all MDs that
No, they're not.
prescribe this stuff."
Nope.
So I said, "I just call them prescribers." I was watching this TikTok this morning actually, and it was about I think it was a med school, and there was a psychiatrist on there, and he's like, "We're studying psychiatry because of the science and all the stuff, and I believe in science-based medicine and blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Then you shouldn't be prescribing." if you really believe in science-based medicine
Mhm.
for the typical depressed or anxious person, you might want to actually look at the science.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, this is that shit bothers me because I'm like, if you actually did look at the science, you wouldn't be on TikTok saying that you believe in science-based medicine. And also, why is it that you can go on social media and, profess your love for SSRIs, SNRIs, stimulants, all these things like,
Yeah,
oh, this is the greatest
it's
thing ever.
glamorized.
But you
It's
go on there and you say, wait a minute, how about you look at this side and somehow you're a quack?
Mhm.
Somehow you shouldn't be talking about this because you're not an MD. And I'm like, well, what happened to all those prescribers that aren't MDs that are prescribing this shit? You
Mhm.
know? You shouldn't be talking about this because you just have a PhD or you're just a therapist, you know? You're not a real health professional, you know? And I'm like, damn, you guys don't get it, do you? You
Yeah,
know? You don't.
you're missing, like, the whole that goes back to agency and getting curious, like, you
Mhm.
just take people take what you say at face value,
Mhm.
when there's so much more to it than that, and
Yep.
research is fraught with bullshit, right? Like,
Mhm.
so I just keep not that I don't want to negate research because we talk about it a lot
Mhm.
when on this show, but we also try to choose things that don't have a ton of conflicts of interest identified. And if they
Right.
do, we bring it up and we say they did mention in this study. For example, this article, something that I think is a variable that they could have controlled for and assessed better was how people were going off of the medication.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Did
how
they
the
do it in
titrate
a certain
yes.
way or they
Yes.
did?
Was
Okay.
it abrupt? Did you spend
Right.
3 to 6 months doing a hyperbolic taper? Did you so
Right.
it doesn't go into that. I think that that probably makes a difference.
Well,
Um,
I think probably why they didn't was because the majority of people do it abruptly,
yeah,
you know? Uh,
they do,
yeah,
and
this
they
is the
also
classic,
yeah,
the classic
yeah,
either cold turkey off of it because your doctor's not helpful and you're sick of
yeah,
fighting them every day,
yeah,
or they do the very fast every other day, half of this and then every other day bullshit that happens and you're done in 30
right.
days,
Right. So that
like
25% of people that couldn't get off,
mhm.
part of me, I get curious about. I
I
wonder why
Yeah,
it is. And if
yeah,
it would have been done differently for you, I wonder if that those
would have
25% of
changed.
people would have changed.
Yeah,
I also
that's
wonder
a good
about the
question.
damage that's done to the brains and the bodies of the people and
Mhm.
like what that will look like down the road. So
That
there
part.
are variables, right, that they couldn't
Yeah.
account for or measure in here. But in my brain, I kept thinking, okay, that 25%, I wonder how those people went off.
Yes. Yeah, so because there
Yeah.
isn't, standard research yet about tapering,
Yeah.
which is why it's so difficult. So when
Mhm.
they say, go to your prescriber and they'll help you taper, it's like, well, they're just kinda winging it. They're
They
winging
are.
it too. They're
Yeah.
winging it based on what they know, because there's
Mhm.
no standard research, and the reason there isn't standard research is because everybody is different, so you
Sure.
account for differences, but I feel like most prescribers who are tapering clients, are doing it all in the same way, right? They're doing it because that's what they've seen work in their office or whatever,
Yeah.
or it tapers off that med and we'll put you on another, and we're gonna call that a success. I
Sure.
successfully tapered you off of Psych Med A, and now you're on Psych Med B, and we're calling this a success. You're still on a med. That's not a success.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, you're
S
just on something else. But I'm so tired of, I'm so tired of the stupid word stigma now with mental health and it meaning only that you support medication use. Like, I'm so tired of anything to the contrary is stigmatizing getting help. I'm like,
Mhm.
informed consent is a necessary thing.
Yeah.
It's necessary. So I think you're stigmatizing mental health by gaslighting the shit out of people when it's not helping them or making them worse or they can't get off of it. And you say, well, that means because you need to be on it for the rest of your life. Well, maybe I need to be on it because it's fucked up my brain so bad that I can't get off of it, you know?
Yes. And, you know, that's part of this withdrawal piece when people are trying to get off. And even
Mhm.
this research, right? They say right at the end, findings point to the existence of a genuine withdrawal syndrome that is associated specifically with antidepressants, which can cause very severe symptoms. They can be long lasting and have this profound impact. And they go through all these big areas of people's lives that have been impacted just by trying to get off these meds,
Mhm.
just by trying to get off of them because of the withdrawal that happened. So then they talk about this scale and how that this DOS scale can be helpful to distinguish between the two, right? Between withdrawal and actually like relapse of an underlying condition.
Mhm.
And that's, I think that's the piece that is helpful, and we need more
Well,
of that.
right, because the difference is the relapse is a set of whole different symptoms, right? With
Correct.
that, yeah. So when
Yes.
you're relapsing, did you relapse back to the symptoms that you had before, or do you have something else? I think I remember you, Jen, saying that you started because of depression on medication and you ended up with anxiety.
Yes.
Is that, yeah.
Yes.
So, like, you didn't even, like, and which is probably produced because of the medication, in my
Mhm.
opinion now,
Yeah.
when you think about it. But I
Yeah.
remember you had that epiphany, you're like, "Wait a minute, I started off with depression and now
Mhm.
I have anxiety."
Yeah,
Like,
I was super
"What?"
sad and down and depressed, and now am got anxiety through the whole thing, and now it's anxiety on crack.
Yeah.
Now there's not
Mhm.
enough L-theanine and GABA in my
The
drawer to get me
world.
through a goddamn day right now.
Right.
And there's
As
not
she's
enough
withdrawing, she's going through a hyperbolic,
there's
withdrawal,
not
so
enough magnesium baths. There's not enough sisters of sleep. There's not like all the things, right? But I
yes.
never had this in my life. So
Right.
when you look at this withdrawal sheet for anybody, who's curious about this, it
Mhm.
really simplistically separates symptoms prior and then symptoms once you start to
Mhm.
titrate, taper, go off, whatever it is. And it's
I think
kind
it
of a slap in the face when you look at it and go, I had
yes.
none of these. I had none of these when I started my meds. Like, I was
But
just
no,
really
but
sad.
people are like this, but nothing to see here though. Like they're doing its job. Oh,
Mhm.
that just means, Jen,
Yeah.
that the depression has resolved and now the anxiety can come through,
Right.
right?
Oh, sure.
I mean, those are
Mhm.
things that we've said. Like, oh, that
Yeah.
just means that,
Mhm.
the medication resolved, or resolved your anxiety and now the depression can come through. Like that's
Yeah.
what that means. That is not what that means.
Yeah.
That means that your neurochemistry has changed so much that now you reach symptomology for different diagnoses.
Well, and speaking of the diagnoses, the thing that they talk about in this article too is that, like, regardless of diagnosis, these things are still happening, right? It's these
Yeah.
meds are an equal opportunity employer in that way, is the way that I kind of view it when I was reading this, regardless of diagnosis, whether you had major depression or you had bipolar disorder, regardless of the label, okay, this is still happening to people,
Right.
which means that we prescribed in all different kinds of way, different, similar drugs that are in these antidepressant categories. Okay. Like when you really think about this, we label someone depression, we label somebody bipolar, we label somebody with anxiety, right? Whatever it is, you're still going to come out on the back end. 80% of you, regardless of that label given to you, are going to come out on the back end of going through withdrawal when trying to get off of these drugs. So what is that? What's the science behind here's my diagnosis, here's my medication?
There isn't
If
any
we're all in the same damn
boat.
spot.
Yeah, in the end. Yeah, in the
In
end.
the end, we're all in the same spot. Like,
Mhm.
and it's because there isn't a lot of good science, which is this is where I disagreed with her and RFK on this, because they talked about good science in prescribing. Well,
Mhm.
they both agreed on that. I'm like, I don't agree with that at all, because the good science, as we know from many psychiatrists that are out there that are now in prescribers that are really honest and saying, listen, it's like spinning a wheel and you pick a med.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep,
To
and if
say it
that
really
med made you
bluntly.
worse or didn't help, then we'll
Yep.
just spin the wheel again and start with
Yes.
something else, or we'll
Yes.
add another on,
Right.
we'll add
So
one
there
more on.
isn't a ton of science, because you would think that if there was, we all wouldn't end up in the same spot because we're being prescribed based off of a diagnosis, which is to be formed in a very clinical fashion. Then the
Right.
meds come with that science based because of the clinical
Right.
fashion.
Yes.
So, but yet we're all in the same spot.
Right. We all end up in the same place anyway. So
Which
is the diagnosis even important? I
does
don't
it
know.
even matter?
Because
Correct.
I would also argue that the majority of people who go to their doctor and they start complaining, giving their list of symptomology complaints or whatever,
Yeah.
they don't meet diagnostic criteria of any of this. Like
No.
there's no way they can meet diagnostic criteria for this,
Yeah.
because they only ask, like for me, the last time I went, I mean, she asked if I had, thought about ending my life and if I was sad and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, none of that's diagnostic. Like,
Mhm.
but I would guarantee you if I said yes, that I, don't enjoy things that I used to enjoy, blah, 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 that I would have been offered something. I would have been offered some type of medication. I would guarantee I know what to say to be offered something or
Sure.
not. And I would probably even be offered it if I was thinking it didn't mean anything. Like, you know what I mean? The way that they give it out to people
Yeah.
to destigmatize mental health and to help people instead of just saying, "Hey, what is your diet like? What is your are you getting any exercise in? Really?" I mean, I know they ask about fruits and vegetables and how many servings and everybody lies on that shit. Like, yeah, like
Food pyramid.
right, or even if you drink alcohol, like
Yeah.
uh, I mean, all this
Right.
stuff. So
Yeah. Let's.
there's so much to this, and I think prescribers just need to take a step back and not be so willing to prescribe. Here's the deal, but the other piece of this is all these mostly women running around going, "What, do you want someone to end their life? These are life-saving meds." Like, not everybody is in that category. The majority of people who go in and get prescribed something is not because they are this close to taking their own life. That is not a thing.
Yep.
Like, it's not. And I'm so tired of that being the rationale for everybody to be on a psychiatric medication,
Mhm.
especially when the research is clear. That might actually make you want to take your life, putting you on. Like, I don't this
Correct.
is something that I have such a hard time with. Like, if you bring a teenager in and they're complaining that they might end their life or, whatever, all these things, and you give them a medication that actually has a black box warning for doing that, you
Mhm.
know, especially when in research and everything they talk about, like, if you give them something, a side effect could be more of that thing, right? Like
Yep.
anxiety, the side effect could be more anxiety, suicidality, the side effect could be more suicidality. Why would you give somebody who is already prone to that something that might actually cause more of that? I don't this is something that I don't get. And then I think about all these classrooms of kids who are on all these meds who are aggressive and throwing chairs and doing all this stuff, but not a single person is saying, maybe it's the medication. Maybe the medication is causing this. So we'll take them off. Oh, that just got worse. That it got worse, right?
Mhm.
Because they're in withdrawal and they can't articulate that because they're
Yep.
children,
And
you know?
that's the like life-changing kind of
Yeah.
events that
Well,
are
and
being
think about
talked
it.
about in this
Well,
study.
Jen, they talk about and they're investigating adults in this study,
Yep.
2 to 5 years of withdrawal symptoms.
Yes.
So you take a child off medication that's been on them for several years, they could be withdrawing for 2 to 5 years, you
Yeah,
know?
whose like internal like system, right, still is developing as well,
Yes.
right? Like
But we're saying
that's
they
all
need
still
more
developing.
medication or they need back on it because of the withdrawals that are different now, their behaviors are worse, you know?
The respondents described withdrawal as being life-changing. Verbatim comments were stated, "It ruined my life and it still is. Permanently changed my life, made my life hell. Created 9 years in a hell with ups and downs, caused a total life breakdown." People described how their lives had to totally stop. They couldn't cope with normal daily responsibilities. There was a handful of people in this study that were completely bedridden, um, um, and then another higher percentage that developed agoraphobia and social withdrawal. Okay, some missed out on time with kids. had to give up their career, shut down their businesses, lost confidence, self-esteem, and were kind of socially isolated and reclusive. That paragraph, I don't care how many people are in this study, right? Even if only 50 of those 1,200 dealt with this,
Mhm.
that to me is, let's read this to people
Yeah.
when we're doing informed consent with our patients. Here's what you need to know could happen.
Yeah. Well,
This is what
when I
withdrawal
see
does.
this video that we started with, this Tina Smith, and she's saying, "Well, it worked for me," is what she's saying. "Well, it worked for me, therefore the
Yeah.
alternative shouldn't even be discussed," you know? And like this guy or not, this is not what this is about. His statement was, "But there are people that it hurts. There are
Yes.
people, and there's a lot of people that psychiatric medication has harmed, a
Yes.
lot, adults and children." And he's saying, "Let's not forget about those people. We can't just say, 'Well, it helped me, so shut the fuck up.'" Like,
Mhm.
literally, that's what I hear over and over. "It helped me, so you are fear-mongering." Like,
Mhm.
"Actually, it hurt me. Why can't I share my
Sure.
story that it hurt me? Why can't you share your
Mhm.
story, Jen, that it hurt you?" These stories are just as real, and they are just as important
Yeah.
as someone who is banging the drum of "It
Mhm.
helped me," and usually I go, "It helped you until it didn't."
Yep,
You
because you're
know?
destigmatizing it.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
why. That's why, because in a world where we need to be able to identify ourselves in a way that this is part of who we are, our
Well, we've
identity
now
is taking.
weaponized the word
And
stigmatized.
we
It's
have,
stigma,
and
like it's a
now it's
weapon.
in the
Mhm.
words of Dr. Yosef, what the fuck does that even mean?
Yes. Yes,
When he
because we
came
have
on the show,
weaponized
I
that
was like,
word to mean anything other than my truth in mental health. If I feel something has helped me,
yeah.
anything other than that is stigmatizing mental health care. And I'm like, what's stigmatizing is believing that people don't have their own truth in mental health care. What's stigmatizing is the idea that there's not more than one way to do this medication. Like, to me, that's stigmatizing. It's
Yeah.
stigmatizing to think that people are just, destined for doom and gloom. If you ask what it means to work, what does it mean to have a medication work? I don't even know, because when your symptomology changes and suddenly now you've got anxiety. It worked for my depression, but man, do I have anxiety now.
Mhm.
Did
Yep.
it really work then? Did it really help you? You
Mhm.
know? I think it's stigmatizing to not talk about all angles. All angles. And this is why Jen and I are so passionate about this, because there's not a lot of people talking about the other side, and and another side truly exists. It exists out there. It exists in both of us.
Yep.
Jen more than me, because, my experience was different, but that doesn't mean that it's negated,
Right.
you know,
Right.
but also in the clients that we've seen over the years, right? I mean, if I could roll back in time and just, have different conversations, I would. But and it also exists in all of our comment sections on social media. Because again,
Yep.
like, just like this, Tina Smith, like, she wants to shut down any
Mm.
conversation
Yep.
that is against anything that she knows to be true herself, right? Or thinks is true.
Yep.
So if she thinks it's true, then it must be researched. That is not true, because even when she brought up I just want to make this point again, like the school shooting, she was trying to pinpoint it down to school shooting, but aggression is a thing, homicidality
Mhm.
is a thing, suicidality is a thing
Yes.
when it comes to these medications. Like,
Yes.
to say, "Well, we can't draw that conclusion," because I'm like, what did she say? Even the ones that were on SSRIs, they couldn't draw that conclusion. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Really?"
Yeah. Yeah, you take
And I
somebody
wonder
who's
if somebody was on, I'm not even talking about school shootings, I'm talking about mass shootings, whatever, was on and then they were off and they're in
withdrawing.
withdrawal
Yep.
for 5 years.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yep. That's
Yes.
exactly what I was thinking. So how many and I don't think this correlation in research can cleanly be drawn, which is
Right.
why I think it's kind of funny that she said that because
She's drawing it all the time, like,
she's trying she's trying to say that we can draw a direct line between these mass shootings that have happened and
and it's not
antidepressants
this.
and say
Right.
and it's not that easy. And in
Mhm.
fact, I would even argue that there's probably even a higher correlation of people withdrawing from taking these
Yes.
along the way.
I've
And
wondered
in this
this.
state of akathisia, the shit
Yes.
that you are willing to do, let me tell you guys, it's not a good space. And you will give anything to make it go away. I could only imagine that actually being the culprit. Maybe not only being on the medication, but maybe possibly coming off of it
Off
or
of it
withdrawing from
for
it.
years, like, and
Mhm.
it can go on for years.
Abruptly
You're changed.
stopping it,
Yeah.
which is a
Mhm.
very hard correlation to draw to determine whether or not somebody was in that space, right?
Mhm.
And stopped their meds, and then this happened a week later, or
Or
a
a
year
year later.
later.
Right.
Right. So
Mhm.
I think the notion to say that we can draw this straight line, I think in any
No,
kind of research
it's
that
not
means there's
true.
no confounding variables anywhere ever. So it's a very
Right.
naive statement, and it's very tactfully placed for people that don't think about it in this way. It's a very emotional statement, and you
Mhm.
draw right into it then and think that that guy is nuts for even saying that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't think
It's
he
those
is.
things that make you go, "Mm,"
So,
and yeah, so that was very powerful. So I'm grateful to have watched that little clip.
yes, thank
Um
you, that functional nurse, for kicking that Terry's
Yes.
way.
Yes, because I literally have been off of social media and trying not to pay attention, to the political BS shit that's going on right now because it's just too much for me in this point right now.
Yeah.
But this one made a lot of sense to me, and I felt compelled to talk about it. So, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode too. We were pretty impassioned, at least
We
I
are
was, because
ranting.
I'm like, "Damn,"
Yeah,
this stuff
it's
this
a
stuff
lot.
is so important to talk about. Jen and I
Yeah.
will continue to talk about the other side of things and offer you some other alternatives in your life. So please keep listening. If you like us, give us only 5-star ratings, because if you don't, just move on, right? 5-star ratings only. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Let people know that you love the Gaslit Truth podcast. Send us your Gaslit Truth at the Gaslit Truth podcast at gmail.com. That's a wrap.